Hi guys, welcome back to the PTC podcast. I'm here today with Mark Wilson, all the way from Sydney. This is I think this is the first international one we've done. Um, Usually we're either sitting together in a room. So I met Mark it's about 6,000, 5,000 meters up in Nepal a couple of months ago in Mera. And Mark was there with a group from Sydney. And in the small talk of who you are and what you do, Mark basically started telling me how he runs a little gym. He likes to take his clients to do bigger things, bigger goals, think a little bit more than just losing weight and gaining some muscle. And in the interaction, I thought this guy's going to think I'm joking when I tell him what I'm about to tell him, because this is exactly the same thing that we try and do at the training room. So if you want to introduce yourself, Mark, and tell us how you got from the UK to Sydney and then how you ended up on Mira.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me first, Keith. And you're right, I didn't really believe you at first. I thought you were sort of just having me on. And then, yeah, so pretty kind of a crazy place to meet, really, when you think about it, especially when there's clearly a similar journey at some point for us in there. But yeah, I obviously being British, I moved to Sydney about 11 years ago now. I've been in the fitness industry completely over that time, and I probably did a couple of years in the UK, sort of working, just finding my feet really with how to be a good PT at that stage in my career. Now I find myself in Sydney. I've had the pleasure of, probably similar to you, working in several facilities and being ranging from being gym manager to team leads and head trainers and all those sort of things, working your way up from the bottom where you're sort of really wiping down equipment and counting reps and trying to figure out the best way to coach. And over those hard yards, you sort of develop a skill set. And now I find myself in a position where, thanks to my amazing support and clients over the years, and yeah, just everyone who's been involved, I find myself very grateful to be in the position where I've got my own studio and I can really put my own sort of philosophies into play, which I think is something we were talking about up in the Himalayas. And it's quite nice in a world where, you know, quite often you are sort of guided on what you have to do, to be able to put your own stamp on it and make the difference that I think will really help people improve their health. And yeah, I'd imagine that's where the conversation is going to go anyway. So there's a huge part of that. And yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
So when you moved over from the UK, what made you go all the way to Sydney?
Yeah, look, so my wife and I, Heather, we were at a point in our lives where we just wanted to go backpacking. And we were that typical sort of mid-20s, like, let's go see the world type attitude. And she'd finished uni. She'd been a couple of years out. I was working in the corporate sector and then running my own sort of part-time, you know, fitness gig. But I knew it was just going to be, it was all just building to go away and do some traveling. So we did Central America, came to Australia for a sister's wedding, and then we sort of just stayed here for a year. And back then, you had to do like, can't remember how many days, 90 days or something, farm work to qualify for your second year. So we did all of that, and then we went for the first time to Nepal. After that, did Everest Base Camp together, Gokyo Lakes, which I think you've done as well. You did that with Caroline, and
We did Everest Base Camp.
Everest Base Camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did that, and then did some stuff in Southeast Asia. Went back to the UK, and there's essentially it's changed now. I think you can pretty much come at any age, but back then you had to come for your second year, if I remember rightly, before you were 30, and we were 28. So we were like, well, we might as well go, see what happens, and then well, we're still here. So so it went well, and yeah, it's good. Like, for us being quite outdoorsy people, we really value that, and the sun and the surf and all of those things. And yeah, it's just fantastic. So that's kind of how we ended up here. And now we've got two gorgeous baby girls who call Sydney their home. And yeah, life is good.
Do little Aussies.
Yeah, the eldest, the 3-year-old, she's got, you know, a really lovely Australian twang in her voice, which got a few comments while we were out in the bush this weekend. So that's great.
Okay.
So a few comments as to, is she really yours? So
yeah. I've got my sister's in Adelaide with 3 kids, all full
Yeah,
blown, full blown Australians. So
it's kind of weird. Like I remember my parents. I remember thinking because I grew up in Wales, so my parents are English, and I'm Welsh essentially, and I had this really strong Welsh accent for the first 16 years of my life until we relocated to England, and I've sort of always thought that must have been so weird for them having these 3 kids with Welsh accents. Now I'm going to live it, so
yeah.
there you go, karma, payback, I guess.
Did you do the farm work? Did you do your 3 or 9 months of farm work?
Yeah, yeah, we did. Have you? Do you know much about that?
Yeah, so I was in Australia in 2006 to 7, and this was pre-recession. This is failed
Yeah.
university, failed rugby career, running away from everything, just working in construction sites in Sydney. Uh,
Hmm.
and everybody was, and the girl I was with at the time, she had to go back to Dublin to do her second or third year law degree. So we always had a bookend on it. And this is
Hmm.
recession. So like emigrating was not really necessary at that stage. It was
Yeah.
just something that
Hmm.
people did in the 70s and in the 80s maybe, but like we were going back to Dublin and I just had to figure out what I was going to do. But we had no interest in the farm work, but lots of people were doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was sort of like a means to an end, I think, for a lot of people. Like I think generally most people just want the option, don't they, to do the second year, travel a bit more because Australia is so big. You can definitely live on the travel bug for a long time, and you haven't got to deal with reality. So I
Yeah.
think there was maybe a bit of a part of that for us, but the main thing was, yeah, we just wanted the option because Heather, my wife, she's got 2 sisters here, and so she was a bit like, well, I sort of want to spend time there and at least have the choice. So yeah, we did the strawberry picking, which was, I mean, it's great if you like eating strawberries, but it's terrible if you want any sort of cash or anything like that. But
But
it was fun. Like we made the most of it.
it teaches you a hard day's work because I worked in construction sites and I absolutely hated the job. Like I hated it. And it taught me 2 things. Never ever complain about a hard day's work again. And never do a job that you hate getting out of bed in the morning for. Like just I've lived both of them and the feeling of dread I used to get, literally walking out of my apartment and down the stairs to get the bus, and then just at the bus in the dark, getting across the city, like, and then getting onto a construction site, staying there till 3, 4 o'clock, and then just getting the bus back, and then just falling asleep on the couch and doing it again the next day. Like, but it taught me
Yeah,
a massive lesson in hard work. Like, I'll never complain about a hard day's work because I know there's nothing I'm going to do that's going to be harder than trying to jackhammer out an air vent duct in a ceiling for 4 weeks. Like,
yeah. I think it definitely feeds into that thing of what's the word I'm looking for? Where you're doing delayed gratification, I guess. You're getting the hard stuff done in the short term to have something good in the long term, aren't you? And that is literally farm work is like, especially the fruit picking. There are good farm jobs out there, and maybe some people like the fruit picking. Maybe it's just me, but but that is literally the epitome of it, where you're just like every day counting the day. Can't wait for this to be over so I can go and well
yeah.
surf basically.
Yeah,
That
well,
was
I moved to
that was the
Melbourne.
ambition.
I got a job in a call center. I was like, I'm not doing that, anything like that again. Like,
I
just
really sacked it.
well, we did. I did 7 months in Sydney. And basically, I spent a lot of that time on one site, way out on Military Road on the north side. There's a shopping center
Yeah.
that was being a little shopping mall and some apartments on the higher floors that was being built. And the guys there took a shining to me, and they kept asking me back, which meant I had steady work. But I lived on
Mhm.
Bondi, obviously, as an Irish backpacker. So traveling all the way across to Military Road, somewhere far, like 20 minutes along the road. Um, it was a task, but at least every day I had work, which meant I had a decent salary at the end of the week.
Yeah.
Um,
Where were
right,
you staying in Bondi?
right on
Were you staying
campus,
in the back?
right, right on the
Oh, amazing.
yeah. We paid a lot
That's
for it.
exactly where you want to be
Yeah.
at
I
that stage of your life.
literally the front window was the ocean. Like I could show you the
Amazing.
shot. It might have been like I can show you the shop just at the bottom of the hill where the restaurant started, just before where I don't know if Ravisi's is still there, but it used to be the spot to
Yep.
go. It's still there,
Yeah.
is
I think
it?
so. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I saw it the other day.
A few doors back from Ravisi's towards the hill was where we were. We paid a lot for it, but at the time, like just getting an apartment in that area was a massive task. So when we got one
Mhm.
opportunity, we were like, let's just take it. So we just took it. We grabbed it.
Mate,
Um,
totally worth it. So worth it.
yeah, it was on that site as well, just in a nutshell, where I met a guy who was exactly the same as me, no career, no future, no education. He was 28, 29, running away from his life in Ireland, and we were both on this
Yeah.
roof, clearing out a roof for a building that was going to be demolished. And I was like, wow, we're the same, me and this guy, but I'm 21, he's 29 or something. Like, I need to sort my life out. So that was when I went
Yeah.
back to Ireland, and then ultimately ended up back in university at 23 in England, and then the rest is all like injury rehab, sports, fitness world.
So essentially, this guy was like a premonition for you of how
Yeah,
things could go, and are you
yeah.
still in touch? Because this could be quite harsh on him, couldn't it?
I've
If you're like, I just didn't want to be you, mate.
no idea. I have no idea what he's doing, because this might have been before Facebook as well.
Yeah, I don't know. When did Facebook? I remember when Facebook. Or actually, I don't remember when it came in. I remember when I joined Facebook,
Yeah,
but
I
and
joined
that
it.
was 2027, 2007, I think.
Yeah, I joined it in Melbourne because in Ireland we had this thing called Bebo, which is the same but a different type, like MySpace.
I remember Bebo. Yeah, I was actually on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ireland Bebo was the thing. So Bebo like 2004. But then I went to Australia and all the English people were on this thing called Facebook. Um,
Mhm.
so in order to keep in touch with the people who were also traveling around Australia, like doing the up and down the coast and stuff, you needed to be on Facebook. So when I got to Melbourne, I set up my Facebook for the first time. But no idea who that guy is now or where he is. But I mean, to be honest, those Irish guys used to just, I don't know if they still probably do it, just go to the tea house on Bondi every weekend.
Mhm.
Like that was my
Yeah.
worst nightmare. That was my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
I wasn't that type of Irish guy on construction sites at all. I just wanted to make money, save it, and get traveling. Um,
No. Yeah,
so
it's kind of it is interesting, isn't it? Like going back to, I remember specifically when I joined Facebook because I used to be in the army and I was overseas and we used to get like a 30-minute call card a week, but we could have unlimited internet. And I
mm,
remember Heather, we were together back then, and she was just like, get Facebook. And I was just like, what is this?
yeah.
What is this interweb thing? Like, what is this whole new thing? Where like there's all of this stuff going on.
So
So I just remember joining. Sorry?
you're ex-military, you just said, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. So 5 years in the British Army, in the Rifles.
In the
Good. It was a good time. Sorry, second.
what camp were you in when you were in the rifles? I used to work in Tidworth and Bulford.
Oh yeah, so rifles, that would have been, was that 5 rifles were there? I think.
Yeah, it was one of the rifles were there. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't remember which.
Yeah. No, I was first battalion, so we were in Chepstow.
Right. Yeah, because the
Yeah,
rifles
so
were
not
there.
far.
That's what I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah. What were you doing there? Were you
I,
doing
I
PTI
was,
or something?
yeah, I was an ERI with the Anglians, the
Okay. Yeah, cool.
first Anglians. Yeah, so that was 2012, 2013 when I just graduated.
Yeah.
Um, so there was the it was things were winding down in Afghanistan, but the guys were there when I first got there. So I was dealing with
Yeah.
the rear ops guys, and then they all came back, and then we had to get them ready for the next one. So I did about 2 years, um, and then
Yeah, brilliant.
that was when I moved to Dubai. Then straight away after that,
Was that straight out of uni for you, pretty much?
pretty much about a year and a half after. Yeah, I did about a year and a bit working in football or in London, like just took a bunch of part-time jobs, getting cash from anywhere we could, and then
Mm.
this summer, well, the spring of 2012 when London Olympics was on, I started there.
That's a really good place to learn your
Yeah.
craft, I reckon.
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of tough characters, but a lot of like good feedback, like
Yeah.
proper learnings.
Just as an Irish guy as well, just being a fly on the wall in a British camp was Like
Mm.
everything was new. Everything was eye-opening.
Yeah.
The everything. I could talk about it forever, but now the best thing was meeting the guys and seeing how they used to treat it like we would talk about old rugby tours, do you know?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's it's the lads, it's camaraderie. Yes, there's really serious bits threaded through the conversation, but that's not what they talk about. They talk about the two guys doing the thing together, or four of them did a thing. You know, it's always about like
Yeah.
we were doing this, and some of the stories were incredible. Where you're like George, where like that's incredible from a serious perspective, incredible from a almost you almost got in trouble in that interact in that contact, and now you're all just laughing about it. You know, like a few years on. But yeah, loads of injuries, loads of normal injuries, loads of complex trauma injuries. So I ended up coming over to Dubai, and through the grapevine and the word of mouth stuff, I started to get a lot of clients who had been in like car accidents or whatever. So
Hmm.
there's no like 6 weeks and your ATFL should be back to plyometric training. It's like this person's got two broken femurs and one of them was rotted away, so it's slightly shorter. They need help with the gym stuff. What are you gonna do? And I just like figured
Yeah.
it out. So I learned all of that from
Hmm.
not all of it because you can never know it all, but I learned that style of thinking with the military where you had gunshot wounds, blast victims, like figure it out.
Mm. It's
Just
probably just that broad mindset as well of just being flexible, right? Because you're going to experience a broad spectrum of versions of an injury, if you
yeah.
get what I mean, in terms of how they're responding physically, but also psychologically, emotionally.
Yeah.
And
Look, that's huge.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's yeah, and I think that's kind of underestimated. I think just in if you want to coin it general training, I think people can in our industry sort of get too hung up on this like structure or everyone can do the same thing, but actually the nuance is very individualized and
Yeah.
from the way in which people adapt literally, but also how they can tolerate load or whatever's going on in their life and different stages. And I think it's really important on kind of all levels.
Yeah. So we had a guy, this is an interesting one on the psychology, right? So he had come back
Mm.
a few weeks before the full battalion came back. He had been shot in the
Mm-hmm.
back. So what had happened was across the back of his body, the bullet came in behind one arm. So it
Yeah.
took his flesh across, say, his shoulder blade, came out of his body where his spine was, but hit the inside of his armor and then ricocheted back in. So he had almost two lines where the bullet tracked through him, but just the flesh. So behind his arm,
Wow.
his ribs, just cleaned them out. So what happened then was all of that tissue split and like his upper back traveled up and his lower back traveled down. So they fixed him up, they stitched him up. By the time he came back to me, he was back walking again, relatively functional, but like everything was painful. No matter what
Mm-hmm.
he did, it was painful. And he was a real like 1 out of 10 on the volume scale. Like he didn't really want to talk, didn't want to engage, just he was only here with me for the hour because if he wasn't here, I would have a gap beside his name and his RSM would come and tell him off and he'd get in shit. So he just used to do what he had to do to get through until he got his papers to
Yeah.
get. So fast forward a few weeks later, the full battalion come back and he's in the thing with me and somebody in the rehab group was like, oh, the CO's downstairs in the gym. So everyone's like, oh, fixing, dusting themselves off, whatever. They got to look presentable. The commanding officer's
Yeah.
here. And he starts kind of mouthing to me, like, about the CO, pointing down. He's like, he's a prick or he's a whatever. And I was like, what? And he's like, he's a blah, 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 whatever. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, he's the reason I'm here. And I was like, oh, yeah. Like, I have no idea. I'm just like, talk it out, pal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say, I don't know what you're about to say to me, but nobody else can hear. You're not even whispering. You're not even whispering. And he's like, basically, the long story short was they went into a contact. The CO knew it was going to be an engaging contact, and he never called air support in. And then this guy got shot, and now his whole life is basically falling apart. And I didn't know what to say to that. Like, I don't have an opinion on that. I'm like, okay. So he's telling me the story, and I'm just listening to him. Like, it's about opening my mind as to what can happen and blah blah blah. The next day he comes in, he's way more talkative, he's way more relaxed, he's way more comfortable, he's way more like, he knew what his program was, so he would go and do the next exercise when he finished that one. You know, he just travel across. And I was like, this is so crazy how different he is. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, he was like absolutely flying. It's just something happened to him that day, that conversation, that night. The next day, he came back as a completely different person. And I think it's just that he just got to offload this that was on his mind to me. And I don't know what I did right or didn't do right. I didn't say anything. I just listened. And then he came back and he was fully on board, fully engaged. And he ended up being discharged. Like, he ended up doing we were doing some level of slow motion clean and jerks with a weighted or with a sandbag, I remember. Because I remember thinking, like, there's no way this guy would have been able to do this if you'd have made a bet with me. I would, like, there's no way he can do this. Fast forward 6 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever. I can't remember how long it was. But it changed overnight, just his psychology. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of those, like, guys who were they're actually in with me because the regiment needed to put them somewhere safe because they had so many things happening in their mind and in their mental health. They needed to go somewhere safe. Yeah, all of that was very interesting. So
yeah, I bet. I think it's did that coincide as well with the battalion coming back, you were saying?
Yeah.
Because you wonder on what level, like, his mind was at. You know, obviously you being there to listen to him and a safe sort of space, and is obviously incredibly powerful and comforting to anyone. You know, it's a big part of our role, isn't it? Is to be a safe space where someone can literally say what they want and we'll almost help them through it and mainly listen.
Yeah, but what it also taught me on that is, and this is the mistake I see some of our guys making, is
go on.
when somebody offloads on you, most of the time there's nothing you can do. You know what I mean? Like,
well beyond our scope. Yeah.
And it's not just like when they tell you about their marriage or their family illness. It's like most of the time. It's not.
Yeah, are you familiar with helper versus rescuer? Are you familiar with that sort of approach? And
say it again.
The helper versus rescuer.
Okay.
Sort of paradigm almost, I guess. Well, basically so psychologists will use it where they will advise us, like, so we used to get talks from psychologists on how to be better at what we do, essentially. And one of the big ones that always got repeated, and it's something I try and pass on when I'm mentoring all the time, is just stay in the helper zone, not the rescuer zone. And someone venting and talking about their needs quite often is just an opportunity. Like, the helper bit is you're listening, right? You know, whereas if you slip into that rescuer domain, you're trying to fix this person. And just because someone's, you know, venting to you doesn't necessarily mean that you're then allowed to try and rescue their life and advise them on all the best options for them or anything like that. Yeah. You know, as I'm sure you would attest, Keith, like, our job as a coach in that area is really just to help them figure out their problem for themselves. You know, we listen, maybe ask some clarifying questions, maybe challenge them on a few beliefs if it's appropriate, but really it's about staying in that space where we're not sort of overstepping or impacting someone's world beyond what our skill set is.
Yeah, but what I've learned, and I learned then as well, is it's actually way more frequent than people think. Because you would obviously assume when someone tells about their personal life, there's nothing I can do, but I'll just listen. But I get people telling me exactly what pain they have in their shoulder. Like, there's nothing I can do. Do you know what I mean? But we are in the fitness realm now. You are talking to me about a fitness thing. Now it's sort of closer to being under my umbrella, but there's nothing I can do for your shoulder. So the more you talk to me and tell me and ask me questions, you're dragging me into kind of like what you're saying, like out of my just helper into
Yeah.
the next step of almost trying to rescue you. Now, I'm obviously not trying to rescue you, but I'm trying to make you feel better about every single thing you're asking me. And that's what I've learned is like most of the time, it's not even sometimes, most of the time you have to just like, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Even if you have a theory, even if you have
Yeah,
even if you can
absolutely.
guess, you just have
Well,
to
you
go,
probably do know more than
yeah,
what it's worth imparting. Like in terms of, you're not going to be able to convey the message in like the 45 minutes or 30 minutes or even 5 minutes at the end of a session when people sometimes bring things up, which would be more beneficial at the start. But they,
yeah,
and I think, sometimes the best option there is that reassurance and just offering a bit of gentle guidance around, look, it'll probably be okay.
yeah,
Just let it go. I can't give you a definitive answer, but here's some movements that may help.
yeah,
Um, it's that soft skills side of what a coach does is so important for the client, and it shows that you care. It shows that you respect them as well. I think when someone comes in with like some musculoskeletal pain or even just a problem with their work, if we go into automatic fixer mode, it can be sort of almost a bit condescending or patronizing. Someone's presenting to you, I've had this knee pain for 6 months, and you're like, oh, we'll just do this and just do that.
yeah,
And it's like, hang on a minute, like they've been dealing with this a long time. There's going to be some significant impact on them in so many ways where it's troubled them to some degree. And
yeah,
yeah, I think sometimes, like you're saying, just sort of being like, I don't know yet.
yeah.
Let's work on it and see what happens.
Yeah, what I
Can be really,
typically
really
say,
beneficial.
yeah, exactly. What I typically say on those ones is like, let's figure out the pattern. Let's see what happens over the next few days. Let's see where we are
Mm-hmm.
next week. Like, let's work on some bits and move. But you can really get dragged into just you let yourself get swamped with these problems.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
they're not like the marriage counseling problems. They're the obvious ones that people can see. Oh, I don't know. I'm not the ones where
Yeah.
it's just in that gray area where you're like, oh, do you know what? I can't really, I don't know. Let's figure this out. Let's try and see what we can do. And I learned that way back then with the military guys. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you try and give them an answer. Like I know this much science about this thing, and I know this much science about this thing, but they're somewhere in the middle. There's no point in me telling them all of this, and then, but on the other hand, it could be all of these things. It's just like it's gonna get on me. It's gonna wind me down. It's gonna take it all out, all my
Mm-hmm.
energy. They'll probably be more confused, but yeah, I think a lot of the
I think
stuff.
there's,
Go
no,
ahead.
go on. I was just going to say, yeah, I think for me, especially here, I get a lot of people coming to me after they've been around the houses a bit with some of the more hands-on therapists, we'll put it that way. And they've been around the houses a bit and they've been referred to me by a physio to sort of like follow on with what they're doing or to have a look even. And it's always quite interesting because when they're presenting at that stage, they've generally been seeing several professionals over, we're talking years. So they're coming in and presenting a problem. And obviously they'd love an answer immediately, but I think it's almost comforting for them that there's not like an obvious solution. It's not like, you just need to do this, tap your head 3 times and it's gone. Like it's like it
Yeah.
actually needs to be thought out and a lot of consideration given. But the one thing I will say about one of my key philosophies and what I work towards is the active solution. And I think that is the thing that often gets overlooked. And it's kind of what I try and advise my friends and family all the time when they're seeing any sort of healthcare or physical provider. I'm just like, what does your discharge look like from them? And has anyone mentioned strength yet?
Yeah, yeah,
Because most of the time, from my perspective and what I deal with, especially, it's a strength deficit. And until that's rectified, there's nothing really, you're just sort of treating a symptom, really. And a lot can be gained from, getting the requisite strength in certain areas to fix a problem.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah. I mean, with
I don't
that,
know why I went on to that.
no, I'm with you because that takes it to that's a nice little segue into kind of what we initially had in common is making things about people's goals and how the way I would tie those two things together is because lots of people, when they come in with their injury, it might be a very specific part of the lower back or their SIJ or whatever, where we can talk about that every single week. And we can tell them that we're strengthening you because we want to improve this joint, right? But if we then can add on a component where because you want to in future get back playing tennis, or because you in future want to get onto your hiking, you want to run a 10K. So we're not going to just talk about the thing the physio has been talking to you about. I want to change the way you're looking and want you to look way off into the distance and start thinking, we're going to fix your hip or your thing because you want to do the longer goal, you know? So this is why now
Yeah, absolutely.
this is now why you're in the strength program, because we can't just keep talking about your labrum. You know, like it's a boring conversation. Ultimately we need to strengthen you, and I need to tie that into something where you can understand why we're on this actual what's going to be a longer journey, because you've tried all the like show up to the guy's massage bed, show up to the osteo's bed. You've tried all that, like drop your car off at the mechanic things, and they haven't worked. Now it's going to have to be intrinsic motivation from you over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So now let's get
And I
you.
think that's great. Yeah, I think that's great. And yeah, that's what we sort of agreed on almost immediately without even saying it. And I think I love those other treatments though. Like I love it when someone says to me, "Oh, I'm going to go and get a massage," or "I'm going to check in with the physio and stuff," because I think, fantastic, you're invested in your health, and I just love that moment. I also have a love-hate relationship with SIJ is a good one. So you have someone come in with their SIJ pain, and you'll be like, "Okay, cool." And you talk about the long-term goal, don't you? The thing that's going to give them the drive to
Yeah.
continue this sort of a year down the line. And I don't know what systems you use, but I have my sort of methodology that I've refined over the years, probably similar to yourself. And you sort of like try and get at least three and behavior based to some degree. So there's almost a complete accountability. And then obviously, lo and behold, 6 months into that, the SIJ pain comes back and they're quite frustrated or whatever. But you're like, yeah, but now you run 60 Ks a week and do this and do that. Like you're a totally different entity now. And that injury or that discomfort, you've actually got the tools to manage it. Take a second, let's talk through it. And they're equipped. And it's this beautiful moment when a client sort of realizes like, oh yeah, I've actually got this. Like I'm smashing myself to achieve this awesome goal. Like let's just say it's an ultra marathon. I've got a little bit of a niggle which resembles something that I'm terrified of from my past, but I'm empowered. I can actually manage it. I just needed someone to tell me, you know how to manage that.
Yeah.
And it's this great moment where it's like terrifying not when they come into you, but for me personally, I'm like, oh, and I have laughed at them. I'm like, oh, what is it? And then they'll be like, oh, yes, OJ, no worries. You know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to manage it more than I can do in this window. It's what you do around that run or, and your own headspace with that response, to that stimulus. And I think there's just a really satisfying moment as a coach when you get to tell them that, and then even further down the line, they come and tell you what they did for something that's flaring up, and you're just like, oh, yes. this is the gold.
Yeah, that's the dream client, the person who knows how to do it. You just need to kind of turn down the fuzz in their brain because they have the answer. It's just like there's too much going on here. Relax. Just focus on this and this for now, and then leave the rest. The rest will come back. So how did that get you from there to Mera? Because you had a couple of,
Yeah. So sorry, go on. Then a couple.
you had a couple of guys like who are ultra runners. Like you had kind of almost a spectrum of clients there. They weren't all just
Yeah.
complete beasts.
So I guess a major part of Develop Me and what I want this company to do from the outset is essentially we'll accept anyone who wants to train and to take their lives in the right direction physically and I guess emotionally on the back of that. And the philosophy is really straightforward. It's be better. And that is, those two words for me encapsulate everything about the ethos of what I'm trying to do and, you know, what I try and promote amongst my clients. And it's kind of always been my philosophy as a coach. It just took me the early years to figure out how to best do that. And it literally originates from, it would have been just after I left the military and I had to leave for medical reasons. And I was sort of a bit lost and working in the corporate world. And I was just watching somebody shared something probably on Facebook at the time. And it was a YouTube clip. And I just watched it, and it was just this guy. I can't even remember what context he was talking about, but basically he was talking about be better, and instead of just trying to be right. And he had it under that sort of. I wish I could sort of like quote him and say who it was, because it was really like I really took the video as something that's a really good message. Like, try and be better. Stop trying to just prove your point all the time or argue your side. But then I thought, oh, that kind of applies to, like, it's in line with growth mindset and everything like that. And I sort of went into this thought process around all of that, and then as developed me, and what I want for all my clients is for them to just go beyond their comfort zone all the time. If someone comes in with an injury, coming in to see me for that initial consult is quite often, as I'm sure you can attest, the hardest step for most people, accepting that they need to take some action, maybe go into an unfamiliar space or environment where, you know, for a lot of the people who we'll see for the first time, especially, they may not have been in a gym before, that can be quite confronting. So I think being able to encourage anyone to just keep trying to be better in all realms of their life, we can get a really good outcome. And then Mera and any sort of adventure, for a lot of my clients, essentially being outdoors in those environments where there's no control over this, you know, even the quality of the food up there, but but also no control over the elements, you know, what's going to happen at any point, really. And you just sort of have to accept it. It just puts them in a place where they're really challenging themselves. And it's kind of like the pinnacle of what I'm talking about that I will offer my clients. But if they go beyond that, then amazing. And I think that's how the sort of expeditions came about, where I was like, okay, I want to offer these people who've sort of gone through this process from day dot or wherever they've come into my life, and I'm having an impact on them. I want to give them some sort of outlet or goal that I really, really value and gives me so much self-worth. And I think anyone who's been to the Himalayas has these moments where you can call it what you want. I use the word spirituality, enlightenment, things like that. It means something different to me to the next person, I'm sure. But I feel like being up there, it's a very special thing. And I think all of the mountains offer that for me. And if I can share that with people and give them that same experience in the end, that's fantastic. But also the journey. You know, a lot of those guys over the years who I've taken to do Gokyo and Base Camp or Mera, some of them had never considered it until they saw me doing it on social, and they sort of present the question like, do you really think I could do it? Or I'll suggest it to them like, do you want to do it? And it's a really cool moment where they embark on that journey, and then the fear creeps in at different points. They pull up with a tear or sore back or something after one session or whatever, and there's all of these hurdles that need to be overcome. And it's almost just like a metaphor for life, isn't it? You know, to get back up and keep going and seek out that goal. And ultimately with Mera, and this is a big thing actually I focus on in the lead up to the climb, is you got to understand that we might be 200 meters from the summit and we don't make it. And we've got no one to blame. It's just not your day. And that can happen to anyone at that altitude. And it's kind of like that beautiful thing of like, just go for it anyway. Yeah. And I think there's so much in that, so much value to us in terms of, I don't know, I feel like definitely if I look back at my past, and I'm sure everyone can say this, we can give up a bit too early on things, or we can sort of go, oh, I'm not doing that, it's too much of a risk, or, you know, what's the point sort of attitude. Whereas I think these sort of processes and these journeys epitomize that desire to just sort of just see what you can do, like put yourself out there, challenge yourself on what have you got to lose. They're like, what is failure in this life, and what is failure up there, and how you position yourself with failure can really be a determining factor as to how you succeed or not succeed in so many ways. So I think it goes beyond just going for a hike up a snowy hill to some life lessons and some really good value pieces. And then, I mean, the trips are just fantastic anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean,
and that's kind of it. That's why.
That's awesome. Like you're echoing a lot of what I say to the guys before we go. Like we've done Kilimanjaro a couple of times. We've done smaller hikes around the place, and even with the same philosophy, not just going on mountains, we've taken people to trying to do like a 5K run, trying to do 10K runs, trying to do a half marathon.
Yeah.
And what I try and focus on with people is you're gonna have moments where your head is screaming at you to stop. What's the point? Why are we doing this? Like you're gonna have all those voices, and that's normal. Everybody has that. But it's what you do then. It's like, do you turn around? Do you let that voice win, or do you push on? Do you squat? Do you listen to it, accept it, acknowledge I was expecting this to happen and now it's happening, so that's okay. And now I'm just going to keep going. Like I'm going to keep pushing towards the goal. Yes, the doubts are in and the negative talk and I'm tired and I'm cold. Like, but can you keep going? Like, can you push on? And that's the bit that I liked it on. The mountain thing is great because it's, in some senses, it's so easy in the level of technical difficulty. It's just walking. Kilimanjaro is just it's walking, eating, and sleeping is what you're going to do for like
very achievable. I always think of it, and I sort of say this to people. It's like an incredible goal to go to 6,500 ish, just shy meters. That's a great achievement, but it's very achievable.
Yeah,
with the right training and attitude, it's very accessible to most.
Yeah,
within reason. And I think that's what makes it so cool. Is like it's not out of bounds. It's not like outrageously expensive.
Yeah.
And it's not inconceivable to think, no matter where your fitness level is, if you give yourself enough time to train for it, you can achieve it. And I think that's quite a beautiful thing. And similar to what you're saying with like the 5K runs and stuff. We just got back this weekend from a row gaining competition, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it's what some people would probably think orienteering is anyway. It's orienteering, but you don't have a set route. You just have to get as many checkpoints to score as many points as you can within a allotted time. And we took a couple of newbies to that. I actually took my daughter and carried her on my shoulders for the whole day. So that was, I'm crook. I'm nailed now. I'm done. Everyone else is like loving life. And but I think there's just something in that about all of these things are there, and they're all great learning experiences. And there's so many health connotations to being in nature as well. And I don't know about you, but going on these hikes and these expeditions, it's the most relaxed I ever come home. I'm way more relaxed after these than say a week in Fiji or something.
Right.
I just find it way more wholesome to be up there and this simple.
Probably because I didn't see your daughter on your shoulders for 2 weeks. Family's at home asleep, and the chaos is not where you are. You're in a
to be fair. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of people commented on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like this, like we obviously went 2 different routes in Nepal. We went a few days extra. We went around the mountain, and there was days where we saw nobody. So having done Everest Base Camp, where it's hustle and bustle and it's fully immersive Nepalese prayer flags, prayer rocks, tea houses, like prayer wheels, the whole lot on the way to Everest Base Camp, which is amazing. Like it's an experience in itself.
Yeah.
We got to Lukla, we went down, and I'd say by past lunchtime on the first day, we stopped seeing people. We only saw people in the tea houses. And then until we saw you guys in whatever that first camp we saw you guys was, we would only see
one. I think.
Was it? There was like the third.
I think.
Yeah, the third last one, because that was when we re-emerged back onto the main route. Before that, we'd been off the other direction, and like there was days where we didn't see anybody, and I remember thinking like this is the first time where I'm really feeling I'm enjoying this. Like it's slow, it's long, it's quiet, there's no one around, the paths are like this, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. And there was just no stress. It's just like phones aren't working. You're way off the beaten track even. Um,
Yeah.
and like when we got to I think Kote or whatever those ones, there was internet again. So now and it
Yeah.
didn't really work. So that's the
Hmm.
most that's the most annoying thing is now I'm thinking about internet again and it's not working. So like I'm no different to where I was yesterday up the mountain. I don't have internet, but when I didn't have it at all, it was no issue. Now it's like it's
Yeah.
working. So why is it in my head that the internet's not working? Like it's still not a part of my day, the internet, but because it should be, but it's not. I'm in this weird other place in my head, and it's so strange. Um,
Yeah.
but that was the first time where I was like, you're completely off the track for us. There's no connection to anything. Don't even bother. Just you got a camera and an alarm clock. That's what your phone is, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
And I think that's something that's changed, isn't it? Since, we would have first gone backpacking, for instance, like you used to have to go to an internet cafe
Yeah.
and get the and connect to the world. And the menu didn't do it. So you sort of very quickly sort of disassociated yourself from, I'll use the word challenges of day-to-day life. And I think, yeah, that whole side of it, I agree. And especially as it went down, that was quite challenging for us as a group, obviously being from Sydney. And then there was the attack at Bondi Junction while we were away. And we got word of the attack, but then it was in Tagnag on the second night where the connection just went for 6 days. And it was the first time where I've really craved reaching home desperately.
Right.
And it was kind of interesting it was challenging in that even though I knew everyone who I knew back here in the area was okay to a degree, I hadn't confirmed it.
Yeah.
And it sort of played in my mind a bit. And I found that was quite a unique feeling for this day and age. And I remember you met Rose. We were sort of having that conversation over those few days as we headed up to the summit, just like, oh, we know everyone's fine, but we just want to call and confirm they're fine.
Yeah.
And we were, but yeah, I totally get what you mean. Like it's there, but it's not there, and the signal's not good. So then you end up trying to manage things like you would normally. You were trying to manage or keep on top of things back in Dubai, weren't you, with the new facility, I believe, with you
Yeah.
mentioning.
It's just even the comms, but it's
Yeah.
like not having it. We didn't have internet in both places, but in the first place
Hmm.
there was no internet. In the second place there
Yeah.
was internet, but it wasn't working, and it completely
Hmm.
froze you. It's the
Yeah.
same outcome. We're still playing cards. You know.
It's sort of similar to ignorance is bliss, isn't it? In a way, do you know what I mean? Like it's not available, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if it's meant to be available and I don't have it, that's like, why is this? Like,
Hit it exactly in the nail on the head. That's exactly. It's like why isn't it working? And then we didn't have any. I didn't actually know there was an attack on Bondi at that stage, but in Dubai, that was the week of like the worst floods in history in Dubai.
yeah,
So
yeah,
didn't even know about it. Didn't know about it at all until we got the. I remember I saw one post from a friend saying, "Guys, there's some rains coming next week." Like blah blah blah. It was a screenshot of a weather forecast, but it's like, yeah, whatever. Scroll on,
yeah,
and yeah, when we started to get signal, it was still crazy weak. That everything was over video on Instagram and stuff, and we are sort of half seeing all these floods. Um,
yeah.
but it goes to show that, like, I mean, it's different if there's an attack on people specifically, but where we were, it's like a natural disaster, and it's the worst natural disaster that could have happened in the city in however many recorded history years. Uh, Everybody, like in our group, you sort of life still goes on. Like there's a weird lesson of like even because you think, well, what if I don't have connection and something bad happens? Well, we didn't
Yeah,
have connection and something bad happened, and
yeah,
for us, lucky enough, life goes on.
yeah.
You
Was I think it sort of goes into, and I'm sure you have this conversation a lot. I know I do with people around lifestyle behaviors and phone use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, sleep quality, all of those things, and you sort of touch on it from a recovery stance, but also an overall sort of holistic health position as well, or at least I do. And I think one of the big things you come across in that conversation and what you present to people is we're almost too connected now. We're too aware of all the news around the world, and it's a bit of a dichotomy because it's good to be informed, but there's definitely a point where there's too much information for us to deal with, and there's a lot to say that that's impacting us negatively, and we're trying to control too much and have too much onus on that element of the world, which is essentially 99.9% of it, and we're getting updated on that. And I think when we're in those situations, like whether you're trekking out in the bush anywhere really, or just anywhere where you're disconnected, those problems go away because you're literally not aware.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of feeds in and contributes to how you feel by the end of a trip like that, because it's very raw. It's very sort of humane in a way, where it's like the fundamentals of living, isn't it? Where you eat, you sleep,
Yeah.
and you move, and that's it. And you seek out shelter by the end of the day in the form of a tea house, which doesn't sound as extreme, but some of them are pretty basic. And then,
But that's what you need. That's it. That's exactly, it feeds into your point. That's what
yeah,
you need. It's what you need. Just
yeah,
shelter. Like, you don't need to have a 5-star bed. You don't need to have a 3-star
yeah.
bed. Like, there was places where we were one of the nights. There was no electricity. There was 2-car batteries on the side. I could see them. So they're obviously running off the solar panels somewhere. And that was feeding a
Yeah.
cable up and over. There was one light bulb in the middle of the room, and there was a stove. And that was it. There was not even, like, there was brickwork, and inside the brick there was a blue um like tarp. Yeah, exactly. So there's no
Yeah.
thing between the bricks, there's no cement, there was no mud, it was just stones all put together, and then the tarp, and then us leaning against it, and that was it. We had sleeping bags, we had tea, the stove, one light, we were fine.
The only thing I would say, which is really beneficial, is a pack of cards.
Yeah, we had the cards.
That's the only additional thing
Yeah,
that I would say is an essential for
yeah,
a small group.
yeah, we had cards as well, and we
I
made it
I
work.
remember.
So you went on to do Ama Dablam then after. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Ama Dablam, that's been probably by the time I was going, that would have been an 11-year goal coming to fruition. So the first time Heather and I went, when you go via Gokyo to Everest Base Camp, you sort of get into the Kumjung Valley after after Namche. And you'll remember this, you come around the corner and you get the view of Everest, don't you?
Yeah.
As you're leaving. And that's when you see Ama Dablam too, which is a prominent mountain in that valley. And I remember we went up the Gokyo Valley, which back in the day used to be called Death Valley, I think, because it stays above a certain height, so they couldn't get people out quick enough. But now there's advances in technology where they can fly helicopters higher for starters. But and you sort of do a pass called Chola Pass, and I remember walking out over that pass and coming down and just looking at Ama Dablam for like a day essentially, and then I just said to Heather, who was just my girlfriend then, I was like, I want to climb that mountain. So the first thing we did, I was reading Bear Grylls' book at the time. I don't know if you've read that, The Boy That Climbed Everest. It's a good book. And he talks about climbing Ama Dablam before he did Everest as like a prove your worth. And then that night, lo and behold, the owner of the tea house that we stayed in was his guide on Everest. So I was like, this must be a sign that I'm going to do this mountain. So yeah, finally got round to booking Ama Dablam, and yeah, very excited. I was very open to the reality that I knew I was going to be rock climbing on faces that I don't think it's not as technical. If you've done any form of climbing, it's a decent level of climbing, but it's not super hard. And if you're fit, it's pretty accessible. But just the sheer height that you're suspended over. So for me, that was quite hard.
So
I
how
can't
high?
remember the last time.
Tell us a little bit about the mountain. How high is the mountain?
Yeah, no worries. So the mountain is essentially 6,900 meters. So I think it's 6,986. I'm going to go with. Might be slightly off on that last digit. You can bring it up later and say whether I got it right or wrong. And yeah, so yeah, it's so 6'9" whatever meters. It's a very technical mountain. It's considered really hard to climb. There's a lot of rope work. After camp one, you're essentially sort of to some degree always climbing and on a rope. And yeah, I think one of the things that made it so appealing to me is that side of it is that I knew it would be a really tough challenge for me, and because of the way it's so prominent, some of those climbs are sort of like there's well over 1,000-meter drop beneath you as you're climbing, and that's quite eye-opening. Like I can't think of anywhere where you get something so high, you know, outside of the Himalayas, unless you're rock climbing all the time. That would be more familiar to you. But for me, my climbing is generally in climbing gyms or on like a cliff face that there may be like 100 meters max, you know, so it doesn't change anything other than you can see a long way. But the first few traverses and things where you're sort of hanging, and my guy Chandra would just be sort of leaning back and he's like, see, it's fine. And I'm like, sure, mate. I'm not letting go of this rope though. And yeah, so yeah, it was really cool, and just something that I'd been sort of gearing up for. And I felt like psychologically I was in a really good place to do it. Physically, yeah, just on point. Like everything was sort of aligning really well, and felt really stoked to be there. And we did this awesome route to get there where we went up to different parts of the Kundrum Valley that I hadn't been to before. So we went to Kundrum Village, which is like a really famous village amongst climbers. And it was Sir Edmund Hillary's favorite sort of village. And there's actually a memorial to him above it and stuff. And he's just involved, like the schools there that he built, and just a really, really awesome place. And there's just feels like really culturally significant to the Sherpas. And I don't know whether I think Namche is the Sherpa capital, but I think Kundrum Village is considered like really, really sacred and important. And then we went on to Bariche as well, which is like the journey was just fantastic for me because I was going to places where I've been in that valley several times, and I went to a couple of places I'd never been, which, you know, I was kind of almost oblivious to. So I just really appreciated it. And then we trekked to Ama Dablam, and like I said, physically I was feeling fantastic. I don't know if you recall when you did Everest Base Camp, but you sort of spend 3 days getting to Namche and staying there and stuff, and we'd gone in 2 days way past that into Kundrum Village and doing a acclimatization trek. So the reason why I think I felt so good is because we'd done Mera and I was acclimatized for the altitude, and it just was really paying off. So we got to Ama Dablam, and we just did an acclimatization day at base camp, which was, yeah, really cool, and just sort of relaxing there. We were sort of like really on the back end of the season. So we kind of had base camp pretty much to ourselves, maybe 3 or 4 other climbers in the whole place. So it was very, very laid back. And the way they do it is you then go and practice some climbing skills, like rope skills, on a nearby sort of like scrag, like rocky face, and you just sort of play around a bit. And it's, although you're climbing at height, it's not, if you do any form of climbing, it's not really technical. It's sort of like you've got your Juma to pull yourself up and stuff if you need to, and you don't have to rely on like raw skill, like climbing skill. You can just get through it with a really good level of fitness and some ability, but really it's about confidence on ropes, and that's what the training's tailored for. So yeah, anyway, everything was looking really good, and then Chandra, my guide, sort of turns to me and he's like, there's been a mix-up, and we have no food.
Oh no.
So we had to, yeah, so that was the first issue, and a load of things, like just a load of, I won't go into all the details because it sounds like a bit of a pity parade, and I kind of want to focus on the positives, which was my attitude the whole time. But there was a load of things like that. So we managed to source some rations, but essentially that meant at Camp 1, I was living off 1,000 calories, which, as you know, for anyone of any size, especially at altitude, you're going to need at least, some of my size needs at least 4,000 calories, and I'm probably in a significant deficit then. So
So what were you eating? What was the food that you managed to scrap together?
They managed to, so I say they, him and I, we managed to go to, they have this like lodge nearby, and in hindsight, I'd recommend probably staying there because it's really good. It's just near the base camp, and they had like, mountain rations. So we managed to source some of those, thankfully. But anyway, the next day, so we headed up to Camp One, which is, it's just a long day. It's a long day. It's pretty much trek the whole way, bar the last bit where you go over some moraine, and I don't know whether you should tie on. We didn't, so we just used the rope and pulled. But I think if you were sort of more safety conscious, you attach yourself properly with the harness and do all the good stuff. But we were sort of like, let's just get up it. Don't know if I should be advocating that. Anyway, so we got there and we're just sort of talking about how we're going to do it. And because we were late in the season, it meant that the snow level was pretty high. So we didn't have any. Essentially, the plan is that you melt the ice to drink it, which I'm sure everyone potentially listening has seen or heard of before. It makes sense. We couldn't do that until after Camp 2. So we had to think of a different strategy. And essentially for that time of year, we probably should have had another Sherpa. So the company I was with should have basically had more support for us in order to carry, i.e. water and things like that. And basically there was just a whole, almost like a cascade from those bits of information of all the other problems. So we're chatting to, as you can imagine, like on all mountains, you're coming up, someone else is coming down. So you're talking to them, and then we get wind that there's no tent set up at Camp 2 for us to utilize. Then we're faced with this whole dilemma of, well, how do we navigate this then? So sorry, I know it's like super hard to follow, but essentially we're on the way to Camp 1, we get this bit of information, then we get to Camp 1, and we're sort of like, okay, what do we do now as a strategy? Because we've got limited food, limited water. We want to push on. How do we sort of navigate this? Meanwhile, the guide's then rummaging through some of the debris that's been left, which is way too much for up there. Loads of rubbish, like on a lot of the mountains, which they're trying to clear up, but it's going to take some time. And I'm just like, what are you doing, mate? What are you looking for? And he's like, we've got no cooking utensils or cutlery. So I'm like looking at him, just like, sorry, say it again. Am I losing my mind? We're at altitude. Am I hearing correctly? So we're in this like really ridiculous situation, sat outside the most beautiful scenic setting in the world, just the two of us, no one else on this mountain at all. And you're just on like the edge of a rock, basically. And to go anywhere at Camp 1 on Ama Dablam, it's like quite a large amount of energy usage, and you sort of have to climb up rocks and things. So you kind of stay quite static and just enjoy the view and potter around a bit. And obviously, as you know, you're trying to catch your breath and recover, aren't you, at the end of the day? And we're talking about how we're going to cook, and he manages to find a saucepan in the end, and he's got this little like. The only thing I can think of comparing it to, those little ice cream tubs, and you have a little spoon.
Yeah.
Like a little plastic spoon. Essentially, we had one of those and a makeshift fork to eat the dinner with. So amazingly, I was like, the whole time I kept making videos for my daughter, and they've actually ended up being a bit of a video diary of what happened. And it's 2 parts hilarious, 2 parts like, what the actual was going on there? Where you're just like, this is insane. And there's just clearly a huge mix up and mistakes made on the organizer's part.
Right.
And so we come up with this plan where we're like, right, okay, let's just try and push on to Camp 2. We're feeling good. We're feeling strong. Let's push on to Camp 2. We sort of get pretty much to the bottom of Yellow Tower the next day, do a stash of bags because we're having to carry more weight. We've got to carry this extra tent, We've got to carry extra water. We've got to get extra water and then carry it. So we were limited on how much 2 people can do. Plus, I'm half a man up there compared to the guide, so I'm not, able to carry anywhere near the same level of stuff. but it was cool. Like that part of it was awesome. So I was getting to climb higher than I've ever climbed before, and we're tracking along really nicely. And then come back down to Camp One. We do like an acclimatization night, and then the next morning, he was just like, I just need a rest because he'd been putting a shift in to carry extra gear, and I was blown away with what he was pulling off. To be honest, like my bag felt heavy, but he's obviously doing the lion's share. And I was like, yeah, sure, like totally get it. And then the next day, I was feeling basically I just had a rough night, and I was like, I don't know what we're going to do here. I think we need to. There's just more and more red flags, and it was getting to the point where he was like, Mark, you can't drink any more water, okay? And I'm like, but what do you mean? I can't not drink how much I need, you know, like I need to stay hydrated. And
Why
just kind of got into this preposterous. Sorry?
Why was
Why was he saying that?
Yeah.
Because we were just running out. We just didn't have enough.
Right.
So then we're in the position where we were like, right, let's just call the sort of tour operator, essentially the tour company, and just be like, look, we need another Sherpa up here, and we need them to bring water. We need, like, the situation is this. And there was a bit of to-ing and fro-ing, and then we sort of like didn't hear much. Next night, we just slept that evening, sorry. Woke up the next morning, and they were on the phone like, okay, we're going to send a Sherpa. They can get there by this time. And they were essentially flying them up from Kathmandu. So we were like, hang on a minute, that's going to be like 3 days. You know, we were sort of doing all this math and stuff, and we were like acutely aware that the weather was changing. And then by then, sort of like your mind sort of goes to sort of this weird, I don't know if I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I get quite superstitious over things like that. I sort of go, hang on a minute, are we just trying too hard?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we just decided, look, let's go down to base camp, and then we can sort of reevaluate, but let's just tell them not to send a Sherpa now because it's not going to work. We're going to run out of time before this huge snow dump comes in, and then I sort of like, we're facing different challenges. So they're like, yeah, okay, no worries. And then, so then we get back down to base camp, and we're like, okay, are we basically, the guy, Chandra, he was just of the opinion of like, we just can't do it as two. And that's the end of it. It's just too much in these conditions for us to pull it off, especially with the lack of resources that were available to us with the food and even the utensils and stuff like that. So the no tent at Camp 2, he was just like, you can see he was really stressed by it.
Yeah.
And for me as well, I was sort of stressed, but I was very much in this game time attitude where I was like, just stay calm. There's no point being anything but positive right now. You voice your concerns, but there's no point being agitated. But bless him, I think he was sort of felt responsible, which was a bit crap on him because he didn't do anything wrong. And yeah, so we ended up sort of going, okay, we'll head down. And then we bumped into this random 3 Sherpas on the way down. And one of them was there for us. And I was literally like, this is unreal. So they sent someone anyway, but not from Kathmandu, from Pengbose, which is just at the bottom of Ama Dablam, essentially, sort of like back in the valley. And you would have walked through it when you did base camp. So we're talking to this Sherpa, and there's this whole conversation, and I'm just like essentially sat there just looking side to side as they talk, trying to figure out what's being said. And then they're asking what I think, and we got to the point where we were looking at the weather forecast, and I had Heather on in Australia, so we had signal. So I was on the phone to her, and then looking at the weather forecast, and then they were looking at the weather forecast, and we were trying to work it all out. And we were like, we've only got this amount of time. The weather's going to be bad for these days. We need to get to Camp 1 tonight. And the crux of it was, in that moment, I was just so torn, where I was like, do we just try and just see what happens? Or is this the start of Mark into thin air? You know, like, you know, is this like the idiot who still tried when the weather came in? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as a side note, like Chandra, the guy, he's contacted me since and been like, "Oh, we did the right thing, pull out. Like, no one summited since and stuff." So I was like, "That's good,"
Yeah.
in a sense. Anyway, I digress. So we're talking about like, well, we'll have to get to Camp One today. Is that even possible for you to be of a Sherpa? And he was just like, "No, I need to acclimatize at Ama Dablam," which I
Okay.
thought was good. I'm glad he said that rather than
Yeah.
just being obliging, which I think can be a tendency. I was like, okay, cool. So that's the first issue. So we actually haven't got the time now. And the second thing, which was just comical by this stage, he was like, "Oh, I need to get my harness as well. I've left it in my village." And that was back down past Tango. So that was just like, okay, so this is just not even a like this decision's been taken away. And it was kind of cool. Like I made I'll share it with you. I'll send it through. I made like this really philosophical video on the way down after that chat, and I obviously then spoken to Heather properly, so I was feeling quite grounded, and I was just like, talking about how like everyone thinks how these activities are really dangerous, and they are inherently, obviously, all outdoor stuff is. But I was like, it's so calculated, you can mitigate your risk and stuff. And I made this beautiful, like I think it was beautiful. I haven't actually watched it back. 4-minute video about how like I'm just going to take this graciously, and it's a learning experience. And literally, as soon as I pressed stop, I just broke down. I was just absolutely gutted by the sequence of events.
Yeah.
And I think that's when it sort of hit me that actually there's just been or like just a total load of negligence
Yeah.
on the organizers' part. And then I got back down to Namche that afternoon. So we just got back down really quick because I was like, I need to get back to Kathmandu. I'm missing out on time with my family. So we're going to double back. And we got to Namche, and obviously you're then surrounded by loads of other people who first language English. And I was talking to some other climbers, and they were like, "Mate, you can't stand for that. That's like totally outrageous." And I was like, it sort of dawned on me actually that they were totally right. And I
Yeah.
was weirdly in my own head about it, like, oh, that's the way it goes. Like, it's fine though. And almost like stereotypically British about it. You know what I mean? Where you just like annoyingly polite. Whereas actually,
Yeah, maybe, but one of the things I thought halfway through what like, and I didn't want to interrupt you, was like
no, go for it.
you if there was two of you there, if there was two Westerners who have set this as an 11-year goal, now you bounce back ideas,
Yeah,
it's not,
yeah.
and because I totally get when you were saying is like the superstition, like is there something at play here that's I need to listen to the signs and I need to just respect fate almost and then just turn around and go down, or
Yeah,
is this just part of the hero journey where we overcame all these things and we still went up and we still summited, you know? And
absolutely.
it's a really tough one. And when you have two people, it's easier. It's much easier because you've all got different factors playing into the thought process. Um, and then also you're like you said, you're trying to stay calm because it isn't useful to get angry and
Absolutely.
irate while you're at altitude. And there's only one guy who knows the way down. You can't turn on him, and he can't turn on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
But also, I think when someone loses it like that, you're sort of turning on yourself as well, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you're
ultimately in the end, yeah.
losing your composure. You're not, and I value sort of staying calm and being calculated, especially in those extreme situations. And it's really funny that point. I was something that kept coming back to me was a friend of mine, like a couple of days before I left Rama, like for that part of the trip. I sort of said to them, "Oh, it'd be interesting because I haven't been in a position where I've had to turn around on a mountain before. But I feel like Ama Dablam, with the altitude being a bit higher, anything could happen here. It's unknown for me, and I haven't been to an unknown altitude for a few years. So this could be a good test of my character in terms of, what I should do, and I'll be intrigued to see how I respond." And she just said, "Well, you best practice what you preach because you tell us all the time that, you know, best attitude is to turn around. That's when you get the win, if you know what I mean. If you're feeling sick or whatever at altitude, nothing's gained by pushing through that if
Yeah.
you're concerned about your safety." And it was sort of like a bit of a wake up call. I think what made this though so hard to swallow in terms of if I would have had to have done that, I could take it a lot easier. I've just been like, it's fine. I've turned around. It's under my own choice, and I've reached my limit on this given day, and I can accept that. And I sort of almost have no issue with that because I know that my ability to push through on a physical endeavor is sort of my bread and butter, and it always has been. I can run ultra marathons. I can keep going through compared to what other people would like. People just say it's crazy, but obviously over my life, I've just built up this tolerance. But to have it taken away after all this build up through essentially just a huge blunder on the organizer's part, was pretty savage. And I was, interestingly, on reflection, I wasn't sure how much I'd done my due diligence as well. Because when you're up there, you're in the moment and you're trying to, manage the whole scenario. And as I'm sure you found, with some of your trips, it's quite hard to get a clear picture of what's gone on when you're talking to people on the ground. It's only afterwards you can really piece it all together.
Yeah.
And I've just got this. It's really good, actually, the video diary, because it just documents it as I establish things and get clear conclusions. And I think we went back and checked the emails that I had with the person who I use in Nepal to organize these things. And we have a long relationship and a personal relationship, which was another dynamic that I had to navigate because I value that too. And I think everyone makes mistakes. And it wasn't him who made the mistake. He just probably needed to do more due diligence. But my checking in the lead up was actually flawless. And we've got it all there on email. So I was just like, oh, good. So it's not me. Yeah. But I just, similar, like, I don't know, anyone who's listening or whatever, like, trying to remember what you've sent in emails, I find that almost impossible because you send so many. I don't know if you find that. I'm just like, I don't know what I did. Yeah. And then when I went back and checked, like, oh my God, that was a really good email. I was very clear on that as to where my expectations should be. So, I think that was probably what made it so hard to take, I guess, was that idea that I didn't get to test myself.
Yeah.
In a way. And I think it's, I think there's a lot in that for me personally. And I think for a lot of people, when something's taken away from you before you've got to have the opportunity to stop, I think that can really hurt.
Yeah, I had a somewhat similar experience on Kazbek in Georgia where the group winds were 40, 50 kilometers, maybe a bit more at the top, but on the summit night approach, everyone was doing great. And then the weather was calm at the lower, like at the kind of mid-lower altitude. But then when one or two of the groups started to have conversation that they might go down, then a bunch of more people said they might go down. And then myself and two of the girls decided we'd push on. And then one of the girls was having a problem with her rope. And I was, like you said, when you're just watching the conversation go down in the wind, she was telling the guide her problem with the rope. He changed the way it was tied onto her harness. She still wasn't too happy with it. And I could tell he'd not understood what she'd said. She couldn't say it the way. He tried to fix it. Don't think he made it worse, but he didn't resolve it. So when she decided to go back down, that meant we didn't have enough guides to to make a third pod. So we decided to go back down. And ultimately that was exactly like you kind of said. I didn't get to test myself that time, and it wasn't anybody's fault. I'd actually been at the back of the group, so I'd seen her have this weird issue with her rope the entire day, the entire sunrise to where we were now. And I was trying to shout up, like, try put it over your hand on the thing. It was just, I think because the group wasn't going fast enough, the rope was dropping straight down from her harness. So then she put 2 poles in her hand and she held the rope in this hand for 3 hours. She didn't use her poles, right?
Right.
I'm at the back behind her trying to tell her, put it over your wrist and I can see what's going on. It's at your feet, standing on it. Maybe try this, and it couldn't work. So
could she have slowed down? That sounds like if she slowed down, it would have stayed more taut, right? You're talking about the connecting rope.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
it was potentially just like an inexperienced thing or whatever. But I
Yeah,
could see this problem happening, and okay, what I was concerned about was she's not using her poles. She's not even
yeah,
using
just getting
one,
tired.
holding two in this hand, and she's just leg walking the whole way. We're going up a
Yeah,
mountain. Um, so when this little interaction happened, I could see what was going wrong. And he changed the big rope, made a small knot or made a big knot. I can't remember. He didn't fill her with confidence because he clearly didn't understand. He just started changing the knot, you know. And
yeah.
then she just had enough. And then I was like, all right, well, we have to go back down. But I think going
And
back, say
I was
again.
just going to say, it's potentially like you can see how that was the straw that broke the camel's back, basically,
Yeah,
for her, where she's probably been frustrated for like an hour or so or longer all
yeah,
day.
yeah. And
That
she's
was like the
and maybe her hands are cold. There's low. And again, this is what I realized.
so many factors.
But this is what that lesson taught me was when you come back down, even if you have a video diary of all the things, like you said, like you still can't recreate exactly the brain state you're in when you're trying to make decisions. Like it's
Yeah,
and you can feel yourself improving as you go down. When you're in a really tired state, if you're feeling great, it's kind of the same. But when you're really tired and you start coming down and you start to feel better again, you're like, wow, I really was in a different brain state like 2 hours ago. So you
yeah,
can't remember all the factors. If you do, great, but then you can't recreate the sponge that your brain is receiving that information because it's just completely different. Um,
oh,
but
for sure.
I think going back to what you said earlier about this is the superstition thing, because that's important. I kind of have an idea. If it's solvable, then it's not the
Mhm.
universe telling us not to go on, right?
Yeah, yeah, I
And,
like it.
and if there's any way a solution, then we can push on. We approach that solution. If it's left it's solvable, but I still don't know, I don't have the experience, I don't have the knowledge, then it's not
Mhm.
solvable. Then I have to go
Yeah,
down and I have to take that as a L or as a loss. But then if it's absolutely not solvable, like weather is just 120 kilometers per hour, like you can go, but you may not come back, or you can go, you may end up,
mhm.
that's not solvable. So that's fine. But
Yeah,
there's just that's how I kind of tell myself, listen, we need a bunch of things to happen for this to be a solvable
mhm.
problem. Let's try take the first baby step. Let's try to, and then when you actually hit the dead end, like the guy doesn't have his harness, it's in the village. It's like, well, now we're not going. Why didn't you? Okay, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. That was like it was such a funny moment because we just picture us sat on the side of a mountain having this conversation for about 90 minutes, and then he says that.
Yeah,
And it was just like almost like everyone, he almost acknowledged it as he said it. It came
yeah.
over him. He's like, but I need to get my harness. And
Oh,
it was just like, all right, mate. So I'm
yeah.
sorry, but we're going to go down then. Like, what are we going to do?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Because that's a non-solvable problem. We can't make a harness appear. So
yeah,
unless someone's coming down with a spare harness, we have to go back down. Like that's
yeah.
all. So when you go
And that
back,
was it. And it was, yeah, that's the plan. That is the plan. And I think, yeah, the next plan is to try and do Aconcagua. I want to
yeah,
make that a bit of a focus. And I definitely want to go back to Ama Dablam. I think it's interesting you say about being with someone else. That was one of the things I really reflected on the way down. It was very isolated being up there just by yourself. And as nice as everyone is, the staff that you've got at the base camp, we had two like sort of tea house, not tea house, but base camp coordinators or whatever. They're essentially chefs and cook up your grub and that.
yeah,
And then the guide, as good as they all are and friendly, you still don't have that connection because of the
yeah,
language or whatever. So I think I'll definitely try and talk a friend into coming and doing it because I
yeah,
think it would just make the whole experience just way more enjoyable as well.
yeah,
And I think that's the thing. Like it was incredible. I can look back at it and be so happy because even though it's not the highest I've been to, it's definitely the highest climbing I've done in terms of proper climbing. And the views are just fantastic over that valley. And there's just so much to be positive about. And the main thing is obviously that I'm home safe and getting to have these conversations and, you know, help the guys that I work with in Nepal not have this sort of situation happen again.
Yeah.
And, you know, as soon as I got back to Kathmandu, we went to our favorite pizza place, which I know you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And we sort of sat down and just had a couple of drinks and just talked about it all. And I was just making the point, like, it's fine this sort of happening with someone who's fit and healthy and also nothing happening. But if something went wrong, I think, you know, the situation becomes very different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The complaints are, you know, the whole thing is just way worse. And I think he really understood that and was, to be fair to him, I some of my friends have been very like critical of his side of it, but I'm like, he outsourced to someone who specializes in mountaineering because his area's trekking fundamentally. And I sort of felt like he was sort of caught between two of us. But obviously, the challenge for me in that situation is I have a personal relationship with him for working with him for many years, but also my buck has to stop with him, doesn't it? So I've had no engagement with this other person. But it was good. It was sort of good to talk it through, and I think there can be a lot of lessons learned, which is hopefully better in the long term for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, who might be climbing any mountain, and just, you know, the community is quite small up there. I don't know if you felt that way, but everyone seems to know someone.
Yeah, yeah.
Who knows you. And
Our guys was someone else's uncle whose brother was there, and his you know his wife's brother was there. Like it's all like wow, and they're completely different generations, but they're all together.
yeah, and that's what's so good about it is, you know, all the guides I've had over the years there have all reached out and seen how I did, and, you know, were
Yeah, that's
sort of empathetic to my situation. And I'm just like, oh, that's really nice. And you know that your experience and your learnings will just get passed on, and they'll do everything to bend over backwards and make sure that doesn't happen again, which is
yeah,
really good to hit, like a really positive outcome. And so I'm looking at it really fondly still. And one day I'll go back, but I think Aconcagua next. I think that's got me. I've never been to Argentina either, so I think that'll be really good.
yeah,
How
amazing.
about you?
Um, Aconcagua definitely. I don't know when. Like I don't know if I'll. There's one coming up for with Caroline and her guys in January this year. Um, I don't know if I'll make that one. It's just with you got to take a lot of time off work, and it's just not quite the best time to be going for us. But we'll see.
Come with us, Keith. January 26th. There we are.
Are
I've
you doing
planted that
26?
seed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, maybe,
similar
but
situation, just a lot going on, and I want to make it accessible to more people because, like, with that mountain, it is recommended that you have some experience, i.e., Mera or something of that nature. But you can do it if you're well prepared without that experience. And I think by putting it just a little bit further back,
yeah,
I just make it more accessible, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah,
think, you know, especially if you apply something like, you know, James Clear's 1% rule, you know, if you just do 1% a day,
yeah,
37 times better, you're more than good enough to climb that mountain.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that would it would just make it open to a few more people who I think would really love it and
yeah.
like embrace the challenge and the journey. And yeah, because Caroline, her and Sophie tried it before, is that right? And
Yeah, they
they
got
high camp weather.
yeah, they did like the what they but it was 120, 100, like at one stage it was 170 on the mountain forecast app. Do you know, like there's just no chance.
Mm.
Just no. And then when they came down, they had done however many rest days and however many days. The end of January this year, people started to make it to the top, but there was a solid like 2 weeks in January where nobody was going.
Wow,
So yeah, speak,
incredible.
speak to her for some advice.
Yeah, for sure. What was I going to say? Yeah, it just sounds like that type of mountain as well. I think another lesson about all of this is that side of it, and we touched on it earlier, where it's outside your control always with these expeditions and trips, and it's that that unknowing about the weather. So you do all the preparation, you get up there, you're ready to go, and then the wind's 120. You're not going anywhere. But it's humbling. I kind of like that there's things out there like that,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, you always want to summit, but I think there's a lot to be said for not. And it's almost like maybe even more gained sometimes from not summiting every time.
Look, dude, but I'll tell you, one of the girls in the gym here was like, she was asking me like, do you not just get bored? Like you just woke up and then you come down. And I was like, yeah, so what? I said, to be honest, you really only appreciate it really when you have a failed attempt. Because when you have a failed attempt, you put so much time, so much money, so much effort, not just in the 5 or 6 days you're there, but in the run up to it. And you're looking forward to it, you're
Oh yeah,
anticipating, then you're disappointed. Now, every time I summit or I do a thing, tick the box, it's like, I know what the opposite is like, and I'm so happy that this has happened. Like I'm way more happy with the achievements that we've had since the turnaround, because I also turned around from Gilman's Point on Kilimanjaro of the year just before that. So we got most of the way up, a bunch of us turned back
yeah,
down,
right.
which is another long story, which is kind of a guiding thing. The guides didn't have enough support for us to split. So one group kept going. If you're a 50-50, it was better you went back down. So a bunch of us went back down that possibly could have kept going.
Yeah, was that altitude related?
For me, it was tiredness. It was just exhaustion.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then 2 hours from Gilman's to the peak, 2 hours back to that spot, and then a full day down. That day I just didn't want people to have to support me or hold me or take my bag. Like I didn't want to I could see I was still in better shape than most of the group. So,
yeah,
but I wasn't great. So I didn't want to become a burden to anybody because the group
yeah,
more likely going to become a burden to the guides. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so a bunch of us
Totally
just
understand
went
that.
back down and played it safe. So those two were in the same year almost. Those two turnarounds, um, and yeah. Then from there on, you appreciate everything because like, oh, thankfully, because I know how much it eats at you when you don't do it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it definitely it definitely calluses you to be able to handle no matter what happens, whether you summit or not, going up to those heights, it definitely calluses your mind as to how to tolerate the discomfort when it comes in.
Yeah.
And I think even though I led last year, we summited as well. But I think this year our summit push for Mera was actually really hard. And I've reflected on it a lot with the guys who did it. And I was like, that was actually really hard. Like we had a big storm the night before and the snowfall and the snow up to our knees, sort of path, forging a new path in a way. And it was hard. And I think through my experience of going on these trips over the years, I was just very calm in all of that moment. And I was able to impart that onto the ladies there because I was just like, well, it's okay. Like we're just going, you can almost see where we're going. It's just
Yeah.
one step at a time. There's no time limit. And you sort of reframe all these things. But I think we do that for ourselves as well through
Yeah.
experience. And I think there's transferable gains from these experiences just to everyday life. Like by getting through the hardship of one of those mornings, if we use Miro, which is very familiar, it was just a few weeks ago, really. It was, it's a really long summit push, isn't it? From like, depending on what time you go, midnight or two. What time did you set off? Did you set off at 2?
A little bit later, we were one of the last ones out of the camp. Maybe 3 we got going.
Yeah. So what was that? So you got there like sort of like 7 or 8, I guess, by the time. Yeah.
I think
And
7:45. I think I have 7:45 on the photo.
oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's just a long, dark walk
And
in the freezing cold.
it's significantly steeper than the other mountains that I've like gone to the summit of. And it's just, I don't know if it's because there's only those narrow channels, they can't do a lot of switchbacks, or if it's just
Yeah.
A Nepalese thing, I think, maybe where they just go up. Like they're not switchbacks. There's no like let's
No.
traverse. It's just up.
Yeah.
So I found it steeper. I found it steeper than most for longer, like across, not steeper,
Yeah.
gradient, but like the experience of just, it felt like it was just up, 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 instead of,
Uh,
I think if it's more of a cone mountain, they might try and traverse or go around, you know?
It's really funny you should say that because I remember it from Carry to High Camp. I remember it as being really flat from last year. And I was almost briefing it like that. Even though I knew there was elevation gain, I was sort of saying, oh, you get to Mera La, and then it's just like a really gradual incline. And then we got there, and I was looking at it, and I was like, shit,
Yeah.
I've misrepresented this. And they're just looking at me like, the guys, the alpinists were off, and the ladies just looking at me like, you call this flat? You're as bad as these Nepalese guys. And I was like, I know, really, really done you here. Surviving off two boiled eggs. But no, I think, yeah, in answer to the original question, I think there's just so much to be gained from pushing yourself in. And, you use the example of like a 5K run. It can be anything.
Yeah.
It's wherever anyone is on this journey. And everyone has their sort of limit, their tap out point where they're like, did my 10K run, that's me. Fine. You're so much better off than where you were, prior to doing this. And I think that's the beauty of it for me in terms of getting people to just challenge their expectations. And I always use the analogy of horizons. You'll achieve one, and then your horizons will broaden. And whether you want to go to the next one is up to you, but you'll see something different. You'll see a different summit or, different trip or race or whatever that you want to do. And I think just all of that carries into day-to-day life way more than maybe a lot of us realize sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, look, on that note, we'll wrap this up and let you get on with your day. Where can people
Absolutely,
follow
mate.
you online and check out your next success?
Well, Keith, as you've probably seen already, my online profile is really good. No, you can follow me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest. So, developme.training. And then you can request a follow of developme_coach. And I'll
Nice.
be happy to accept anyone within reason. And yeah, I think just good luck to anyone who's looking to do expeditions. And I love a good chat, just like anyone else, about
Yeah.
these things. I think similar to you. Um, and yeah, I think if you're thinking of going on one, definitely just do it.
Yeah.
I say it a lot to friends and family and clients. Just book it. You'll get there. The experience is worth it every time. I don't know what you think about that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Once it's in, nobody ever books these things when they're ready. You book it and then you get ready. So
yeah, absolutely. Mate, thanks again for having me. It was good
yeah,
to catch up,
yeah.
and
Well,
I look forward to chatting.
yeah, we'll try to get to a mountain someday. 2026 sounds doable. So let's see.
Yeah, I'll keep you in the loop. We're just doing the sort of like trying to find which company. I actually messaged Caroline. She sent me some
Cool.
info about who she did it with, so I'm chatting to them as well. We're just trying to figure out. It's a new thing. It'll take a bit of time, but
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. Anyway,
Good.
mate.
Yeah, good. Thank
Yeah,
you.